Hey, welcome to the BK Show podcast. This is episode number 33, and today I am joined by my friend Jesse Krieger. Jesse is the founder and CEO of Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, a publisher intent on serving authors throughout their career with attention given to each stage of the process: writing, editing, design, marketing strategy, online brand presence, and of course, international distribution wherever books are sold. And he's also the best-selling author of the book Lifestyle Entrepreneur. I met Jesse at a mastermind where I thought I was going to meet a bunch of e-commerce store owners. Turns out there was a plethora of different niches in the building, if you will, of different types of entrepreneurs, from Bree, who was on episode 3, Kayvon, who was on episode 1. This was in George Bryant's mastermind. George is on episode 24. Definitely listen to all three of those. Awesome people there as well. And Jesse has his own unique story. I didn't know much about Jesse. We didn't have a ton of time to talk when we were at the mastermind. I knew he was a book publisher, but upon doing some research for this podcast, I learned there was a whole lot more to the story about Jesse that I didn't know. And had I known this, we probably would have connected a lot. We have very similar stories. Jesse's is a little wild, and I'm really glad he was willing to come on the show and talk about everything leading up to him being a book publisher rather than, talking about publishing a book. We do get to that in the end, but he's got quite a story, and I'm super, super excited that he came on to share it. So without further ado, let's jump right into the show with Jesse Krieger. Jesse Krieger, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks so much, Ben. I'm excited to be here.
I haven't seen you in a long time, and I miss your smiley face, man. You're always happy. You always look like somebody I want to be around. You're always smiling.
I appreciate that. I guess I seem to have that effect. I get excited. I smile. I'm effusive. Although sometimes I can be introverted and just hang out and tinker away on the computer and not smile. But when I see you, man, I get a big smile on my face.
Well, I met you much like a lot of people on this podcast at a mastermind, and you didn't kind of fit the mold, right? There was a lot of e-commerce people in this mastermind, but there was, Kayvon from episode 1, who's a closer. There's Bree, who's also on this podcast, who helps women with money mindset. And then you, a book publisher, who you kind of stood out of the room. Number one, you're a very tall gentleman. And so you stood out of the room that way, but you also stood out because you're a publisher, and I don't know anything about writing books. I was part of a company where we published a book on Kindle, but that was about it. It did help us bring in a bunch of leads and a bunch of sales for e-commerce, but it wasn't, a book as all these ones that are on my bookshelf back here. It's not the same sort of thing. So I know nothing about publishing. I know nothing about writing a book. I know nothing about anything you do, which should make for a great podcast because I'm really dumb. So hopefully you can inform me and inform the audience too, who might not know anything about it either.
Well, it really is a black box. Like, it's one of the intriguing aspects of book publishing to me is that, quite simply, you ask 20 people, like, how do books get published? And either people will not know or you'll get a different answer from each one. And I find it's a very fascinating process to be in that birthing stage of content, of somebody's, sometimes their life work or their accumulated experience and their story. And to turn that into a finished product, it's something I've become quite enamored with over the last 6-7 years.
Yeah, I come from this world that was like so anti-funding, anti-raising money, bootstrap, and definitely was told, don't ever publish a book, go self-publish it. You don't need that stuff nowadays. And I want you to prove me wrong. I want you to show me, like, I certainly can go put up a book on Kindle tomorrow. Like, that's not very hard to do, but I would assume there's, certainly a lot of cons when you're dealing with Big Brother, and then there's probably a lot of pros to working with you versus doing something like that. And so I'm excited to learn the process and learn, the pros and cons of going with a publisher as well. Yeah,
we can dive into that for sure. We can go straight away or circle back to it. What is your preference?
Well, as I was talking to you before the call, I went to your About Us page, and I learned more about you on this About Us page than I did in the whole time we talked at these masterminds. And so I was blown away. I had a big smile on my face. I called my wife in here to walk her through this page because I was like, holy cow, this guy has an amazing story. And so I want to tell that story. And I know we can talk about book stuff before we get off this call. And I definitely have a bunch of questions there, but I truly, truly want to hear your story. That honestly, it starts with you at age 18 attending the Los Angeles Music Academy. And I'm just going to let you take it from there because you truly have an amazing, unique story.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. It's, from an early age, I think age 13, 14, I got my first guitar. My dad gave me a Fender Stratocaster. And I just think it was kind of like game over from then. I fell in love with music. I'd find any reason to skip school and just sit there and learn Jimi Hendrix songs, like note for note, played in bands throughout high school. Wasn't really interested in academics. Not that I wasn't capable, but my attention was totally on music. And so after high school, moved to Los Angeles, went to Los Angeles Music Academy, which was 12 months of all music, no academics. And a couple interesting things. There was 80% of the student body was international. So here I am at 18 years old. I had traveled internationally once or twice with my parents growing up, but now I'm meeting people from Germany, Japan, India, Peru. And I'm just thinking, wow, there's so many interesting people and places in the world. That became very important later on. But the musical thread in LA was, we had our band then, at that time it was called the Rock and Roll Review. We were like a cover band. We'd go down to Sunset and we had to pay to play in these clubs. I remember one time we had a gig at the Cat Club on Sunset. We had to guarantee like 25 people would come and that they'd make money to get the booking. And I was like, man, this is really tough to like break into the music industry. We got to pay to play, like for real. So then after that 12 months, I had an invitation from some of my friends growing up to travel Europe for 2 months. And, this exposure with all the international people in school and just never really having taken a break after high school, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So now all of a sudden, here I am in Europe with a backpack and guitar with some of my friends growing up. And I met this American guy named Scott who had been playing on the streets, traveled all over Europe for the last 7 months, totally supporting himself just by playing guitar. And I was like, for whatever reason, this guy knows what's up. So we became friends. We did a little trial show while we were still traveling as a duo, got free drinks and made like 100 euros. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Fast forward, last night of our trip, we're getting ready to go home. Me and my friends were in Nice, France, and we came out of a bar late at night. One thing led to another, and a bunch of guys started to fight us. They basically kicked our butt. And I remember, fortunately, didn't get too hurt, but I remember walking back to our hostel all beaten up and thinking, this is not how it ends. Like, I'm not flying home and moving back in with my parents with like bruises and cuts, and what am I going to do next? It looked so unappealing. And at the same time, this thought had grown: skip my ticket home, stay in Europe, be a wild ass. And that's actually what I ended up doing. So I skipped my ticket home. My friends couldn't believe it. I went back to Vienna, Austria, moved in with this guy, Scott, in a student dorm, and proceeded for the next year to learn German, play as a duo in bars and clubs in Vienna and on the streets. And as soon as I saved up enough money, go travel somewhere new. And so that was my like coming of age, 19 and 20 years old, still couldn't even drink a beer in the States and was playing in bars and having a blast over in Europe. So obviously there was a lot going on within that year, but kind of suffice it to say, like, that was where my life took a hard left when I skipped that ticket home. And it's never really been on a traditional path since. I've kind of followed that intuition across all of the different things I've been involved in. But the catalyst to leave Vienna was one of the guys who was in the student dorm we were living in was studying at the School of Audio Engineering, Vienna. So he'd have us come in from midnight to 6 a.m. We could record for free in a professional studio. And that was what got me exposed to like, oh, wow. So the other side of the glass, like music production, mixing, arranging, that started to become interesting, whereas my whole orientation had been playing and performing and writing. And so when I felt it was time to move, I had applied to and got into School of Audio Engineering, Nashville. Same school, but in the Nashville, it was located in Nashville. So I basically skipped my ticket home, stayed in Europe, and then moved to Nashville. Didn't even go back to the San Francisco Bay Area where I grew up, and spent the next 3 years in Nashville, first studying production. Then I met my bandmate and who became my first business partner, Jake Harsh, and we formed Harsh Krieger, which I think you were rocking out to right before this interview.
I did find it's on Apple Music. If you guys want to check it out, look it up. Their single "Home" is totally on there. The whole album's on there. That's unbelievable. I don't know if you're getting pennies from Apple Music for the plays I listened to yesterday, but
at this point it's pennies. 15 years on, but it's kind of getting into like the main meat of the journey here was at 21 in Nashville, incorporated my first business, which was a record label that existed only for our band. So we kind of saw this fork in the road. It was like we could try and get a record deal, we could try and get signed, and that started to look a lot more like a job or giving away a lot of creative freedom. Or I was like, we can do this ourselves. I volunteered to do all the business stuff. My partner, Jake, was extremely creative, didn't want to do any of the business. And so we agreed. And I will say he held me to it. I did handle a massive amount of business stuff. It was a huge learning curve, but got together some mentors and advisors, called in. My dad helped by introducing me to a few like consultant clients that he knew, and formed this kind of brain trust to help us have our music career, our band career, but be in the driver's seat of how things were progressing on the business front. So this, I really think, Ben, is where like my entrepreneurial journey got legs. All of a sudden now I've got, a team of people, many of them 10 years older, working for us. I'm 21, 22, writing songs, recording songs by day, and then trying to figure out like how to make moves for us as a band business-wise every other waking moment of the day. And the net effect was we raised about $115,000. We hired a producer to produce our album, which kind of inverted the whole model, and hired a manager, hired 2 booking agents, and hired a radio promotion company, and started setting up our own tour. So we were getting our song "Home" on radio stations. Ultimately, it was on like 300 stations. We were touring the Southeast from Nashville to Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina, Michigan, Ohio. We played all over these states, and eventually even toured out to California. And I think it's really apropos to the story that we toured from Nashville to LA and played a gig across the street from Cat Club, where I had to pay to play at 18 and get an X on my hand so I didn't order any drinks. And now we're doing a showcase at the Viper Room, name on the marquee, people out there to check out our show. And that felt like, and tell me if you relate to this, like in entrepreneurship and in life, there's cycles. That was the completion of a big cycle of like 18, how do I get into music? Where do I even start? To now 4 or 5 years later, coming back with a band on tour, effectively running our own record label in the process and listening to our music on the radio. And that was huge. That did a lot for my self-confidence. I'm not saying this was all easy. In fact, it was one of the most difficult things of anything I've ever done. And we could go into some of the reasons why that is, but just in terms of the highlights and the overall experience and accomplishment at that early age, I think set the tone for what's become a pretty adventurous life.
Well, that's amazing that you got to, go full circle and be playing across the street. I think if I had known this story, we would have talked for hours at one of those masterminds, because I too was in a band, right? So I started in high school. I remember during like homecoming, they had like they would do like tug of war and different activities in the gym, and our band was playing Hatebreed like before Dishonor, and a mosh pit started and some girl got her head cracked up. It was insane, like all the stuff we were doing in high school. And then I was writing a lot of the music. I was booking all the shows. I was trying to set up the website, which I had, very little HTML background back then. So at a much smaller scale, I wasn't raising money, which sounds like you were, but I was doing all those things too. And when I recently, it was a few years ago now, I saw some of the old band members, and they were like, it totally makes sense that you're an entrepreneur. Like, you were always the one trying to solve all those problems and book all the shows. And so I could totally relate with you on that, of like, that might have been my first experience into entrepreneurship. And I didn't even know it. I was just trying to, just trying to grow, just trying to book shows. And I too had to, pay for us to be on certain stages, or beg for us to be on certain stages. It's not a life that was enviable. That's for sure. It takes a lot of hustle.
I mean, just one snippet to exemplify that is like one time some promoter in Montgomery, Alabama said if we drove down and played a show in Montgomery, that he'd try and get us to open for 30 Seconds to Mars. So in hindsight, that was probably a complete load of bull. But we're like, oh my God, here's our opportunity. So we like drove 350 miles or whatever, played a show in this small town, small venue, never opened for 30 Seconds to Mars. But that's just one little snippet of like chasing the dream. And, you know, the one that worked was when we ended up playing in Sunset and did that show, that showcase I mentioned. But there's so many like times that we just be in an obscure place and just feel so far removed from like normalcy or a traditional life path. But that's kind of been a hallmark of, I've always gotten a rush from going against the grain or just, I guess, march into the beat of my own drum.
Yeah, when I look back, that stands out to me. Like I was never good with listening to authority or I was told I wasn't normal all the time. That literally the words they used. And for a long time I fought against that. Like, I'm going to make my own way. And I think being in a band allowed me to do that. I'm going to make this work. I don't have to listen to anybody. This is so it definitely, you know, the signs of entrepreneurship there. For me, there was a very distinct ending as far as like, I decided I didn't want to do all the hard work anymore. I was doing too much of the work and it wasn't getting anywhere. I got lured back, a band named With Dead Hands Rising. They're also on Apple Music, very, very heavy. They asked me to, you know, come play bass for them. And I transferred my job. I moved all the way back home. And the day I moved back home, I got invited to play ultimate frisbee with some friends. I dove for a frisbee in the end zone and separated my shoulder, and that was it. Like I'd moved back for everything, and like then I couldn't hold the bass guitar, and so it was almost like I was being pushed in a different direction. And I wonder, was there signs for you? Was there some moment for you where you were like I've taken enough of this journey and I'm ready to go another direction?
That's a great question, man. And yes, there was, and I remember it pretty clearly because. First, the context is this is my life's dream. Like from 13 years old, now I'm 22 or so, 23. And this is 8, 9 years of just 100% like music, my main passion. And yet, as we were driving across the country in a van, probably just ate at Denny's, headed to a show, the voice in my mind was like, there's no way you're going to be doing this when you're 40. And that was the open. And then I was like, all right, well, if I won't be doing the only thing I ever wanted to do when I'm 40, what the hell else will I be doing? And then that is what catalyzed a thought process that quickly spiraled into realizing this had kind of run its course. And so, you know, after we got back to Nashville, finished that tour, I had a heart-to-heart with my bandmate, and we just both kind of realized very quickly that like as passionate and dedicated as we both were, we saw that this was a responsible time to like wind things down and do something different. So instead of trying to force it, instead of raising more money and doing a whole nother album cycle and going down that path, which everybody else in the world totally expected we would, we wound down our band, let go of our team. Nobody really understood it, but I felt straight with it between my bandmate and I. Days later, driving back to California, now for the first time in 5 years since moving out after high school, and my head is just exploding with ideas of what to do next. It felt like after I wound down the music stuff, it was like an open playing field, and I was starting to get excited about like everything. So the kind of quick progression there was like started to consult with other people in the music industry, and then laterally moved out to consulting with businesses in other industries, business development, strategy, things of that nature. And I started to quickly realize that like every company, no matter what industry, needs money at some point. So it's like, if I can connect with investors and help fund companies to continue growing, I saw there was an opportunity. And 2 years after leaving a band, I got my Series 7 and 63 securities license, no college degree, and talked my way into becoming vice president of business development at a boutique investment bank. This is in 2007, a frothy time in the markets, but was putting deals together, was all of a sudden now making considerable money, or at least it felt like it at the time, and started to go to night classes. Just even though I never went to college prior, I started to pave the way for if I ever did want to go to university. And so I was doing investment banking deals and was starting a renewable energy credits trading firm with 2 other partners and doing night classes. And now from the band era, this was my new life, like studying finance, energy and clean tech projects. And the interesting thing, Ben, is like I felt as congruent in each role. Like I felt 100% lead guitarist of Harsh Krieger was my identity. Then there was a period of change, but then vice president of business development also became my identity, just as co-founder of Village Green Energy was another part of it. So I started to get really interested in how the things I'm interested in and passionate about, I could build an identity and a business around it. And if there's a common thread between the diverse things I've done in life, I'd say that's it. That and just listening to my own intuition of feeling called or compelled to go into a different direction and actually doing it instead of rationalizing why I'll continue doing whatever I'm doing at the time.
Do you think that's another trait of entrepreneurship? Like the diving in head first at whatever you're into. My brother used to call me, God, I can't even remember what he called me, the changer or something like that. Because I was big into the band, and then I was big into fishing, and then whatever I was into. Like there was a time when I got pretty good at golf for a couple of years, right? Like whatever it was, and then I finally found business, and I was like, oh, this is like the biggest playground that I get to play in, right? And so, do you think that's same for you, that you just whatever it is, you're going to dive very far into rather than dabbling?
Yeah, 100%. Well, to be totally honest, there are a few things I've dabbled in, but once I'm done dabbling, it's like it's off the radar. Whereas the things that hook my attention, I've gotten kind of good at going deep quick. And I try and just clear out whatever obstructions, excuses, perceived limitations. Be like, how can I get traction in this new space to the point where either someone's willing to pay me money or I'm accumulating enough experience where I actually start to build a foundation within this new field or within this new undertaking. So that, I would agree, is definitely the hallmark of, I've been accused more than once of getting overly excited, and then switching gears and being just as excited about something else. But I assure you, I was actually just as excited about both things, just at different times.
So I got a couple questions that you glazed over there. So how do you go from, winding down the band thing to like, how do you become a consultant, right? How do you get in front of enough people where they're like, yes, I want to pay Jesse money to come in here and give us advice. And then, you kind of miss the working with 4-time Super Bowl champ Bill Romanowski. I'd love to hear a little bit of that story.
That was in that same period. I would say, I would have an exploratory conversation with a founder or somebody working in a small business up to a few million in size. This was after the band. And on one level, I was just asking questions and learning. But if I got ideas or an intuition, I'd share, hey, have you thought about approaching your idea this way? Have you considered modifying your business or your offering like that? And I'd always try and proactively give suggestions. And enough suggestions that land, and then someone says, well, hey, can you help us implement that? So I'd kind of like plant seeds for potential that I saw. And that was how I started to get some consulting work, at least out of the gate, and just parlaying one thing to the next. Like if I got one client, I was definitely talking about that client with the next potential client. Once I had 2, I'd be like, I've worked with a number of companies in this space, 2, and just kind of stack that forward to, crossing whatever threshold it was where I felt like I had established some real understanding. But with that, I agree. Business and entrepreneurship is like the great leveler. Like the entrepreneurial skills can be applied just about everywhere. That's something that's always excited me because it's like you get to be in the driver's seat of life. And there's not too many aspects of life, or at least in my experience, where you can have an idea, make it real, create something that others can interact with, and have set the whole context for something that didn't exist before. It's very exciting. For me, it's like being at that apex of creation and creativity.
Yeah, I think back to your little sharing ideas of how you got clients, of just feeding things. You did the same thing to me. I often try to do this as well. I actually set a goal this year that I haven't lived up to so far, so shame on me. But I get ideas all the time. I passing through people's websites, I'll be like, man, they could do like these 10 things and really change their business. And I want to make a point this year to just send that email. Just make a Loom, a 10-minute video or whatever, and say, here's a bunch of things you could fix that would make you, much more profitable and serve your customers better. But you did the same thing to me. One of the first things I ever filled out at one of those masterminds was like our ultimate goal. We did like this 7 why thing. And my why, I want to own the Minnesota Twins. I think that'd be the coolest business to run. And, I made a comment, something like $1.2 billion is what they're worth right now. So it's going to be a little while. And you came up to me like 10 minutes later and you're like, hey, why don't you just buy them tomorrow? And I was like, what are you talking about? And you're like, well, I think you could go raise the money and buy them probably by the end of the year. And like, that just blew me away that you would even come up with that. And then you like just started talking through this whole plan. My eyes glazed over for sure, because I was like, what are you even talking about? How am I going to go raise $1.2 billion? But that was, one of the many times you came up and you were just like, here's exactly what I would do, and just laid out the whole plan, with asking for nothing in return. And I thought that was really neat. I don't know. I appreciated that.
Thanks for bringing that up. It's like, I realize that it's something that I've always done, and I feel like it comes from a good place. Like if I see potential, if I see somebody that's passionate, then I'll offer a suggestion, which is different than being like, hey, you need to do this, and being very directive. I'll be much more suggestive of like, well, what if you thought about it this way? Do you think that then that could happen? And I guess I learned, maybe it was from, reading Think and Grow Rich or How to Win Friends and Influence People growing up, but just to put forth an idea and support it in an encouraging environment, it makes me comfortable. I sleep at night just fine, not trying to force or control situations, but I've also probably given ideas or encouragement a million times that hasn't gone anywhere, with no loss of enthusiasm from time to time. I guess that's become an inborn part of my personality at this point. I still want to see you own the Twins, Ben. That's still on my radar.
Yeah, I've been debating that lately of like, is that what I want? Do I want to run that business, or do I just truly want to sit right behind home plate for 81 games a year at Target Field and fly to the other 81? I don't know. I don't know if I know that answer. I'm having fun where I'm at, and that's all that matters to me right now. But to your point of like, you aren't transactional. You're just giving. And it's something, just man to man that I've admired from you from the moment I met you, is you just give. You just continue to give, and there's no transaction. A lot of the internet is like, I can help you change this, right? Come watch my thing where I'll kind of tell you about it and then put it behind a paywall, and you can come pay me and I'll give you the secret. And really, there's not a lot of secrets out there, but everything's so transactional nowadays that it's nice to meet somebody who just wants to give and just wants to help support other people. And usually that pays dividends in the end.
Yeah, man, I really do appreciate that. And, I've reflected sometimes. There's friends of mine I've known for 6, 7, 8 years where I remember them sleeping on a couch, and now some of them are worth tens of millions of dollars. And I'm certainly not. I'll be transparent in saying that. So it's like, I think sometimes, have I just given and given and didn't set the expectation to receive? Or am I just pouring into like good karma and everything kind of works out in some way, shape, or form? That has been my experience. Like I've never actually hit the bottom or run out of money in a foreign country or felt completely cornered. Although there's been plenty of times when I've been stressed or felt like my back was up against the wall. But I always come back to like, well, what kind of a difference am I trying to make in this world? Like, is it just to accumulate more for myself and use psychology to get people to part with their money? Or can I plant a seed of possibility and nurture and support those growing, and then that creates a harvest somewhere down the road? So that's the game I'm still playing. I mean, we're not even talking about book publishing, but I'm going to talk about a long lead time from when like the investment and creation happens until it has the potential to make money. Book publishing is probably one of the slowest moving and paying industries in that respect. And yet, another place where it's really a worthwhile endeavor. I get a ton of enjoyment from working with people on their story and their strategy and their accumulated experience. So it's a good role for me to be that supportive, optimistic, encouraging personality in the context of these long-term, sometimes multi-book relationships with authors who are themselves accomplished and experts in their fields in many cases. So that's kind of where it's like landed. Not to skip too many of the intermediate steps, but I do see all of the diversity of experience I've had in the earlier parts of my life being so helpful to understand and be able to work with authors that are themselves from a wide variety of backgrounds, different countries, vastly different life experiences. And somehow I seem able to support people from a wide variety of backgrounds and life experiences and topical focuses. And I guess that's something I personally enjoy, even while it's in the context of a business where we're publishing dozens of books and being a strategic advisor in that process.
I think it's similar to what I do on this podcast, right? I get to bring cool people on and share their story, and you get to do it in a longer process with much more eloquent words, and hopefully learn a little bit about their business along the way, where, I'm trying to, even this is long form content for a podcast, right? Usually my shows are 1.5 to 2 hours, and it's hard to get anything done in that period of time. So if you're able to build these long-term relationships and dig deep with an author, I would imagine a lot comes out of that, in their book as well as in that relationship.
Yeah, man. And quick shout out, respect for starting the podcast. I remember when you were talking about it and I was like, you should definitely do that because you know some really fascinating people too. And you're curious to get the story out. It's not everybody starts asking about the early days in music and Bill Romanowski, which I should, I guess, tell that tale. A lot of the times I come on podcasts nowadays, it's really like author and book marketing focused, which I'm totally good with. But here, quick story on Bill Romanowski. So there I was about a year back from ending the music experience, had done a few consulting projects. And then, this is going to sound funny, but my stepmother at the time was like psychic to the stars. She was doing psychic work, psychic readings for one of the members of Metallica, one of the members from some popular TV shows and movies. And she introduced me to Bill Romanowski, who she was working with his wife. He had just gotten out of this whole, was it steroid scandal or the juicing scandal? And he wants to start, wait for it, a nutritional supplements business. So I thought that's just brazen and bold and I'm into it. So I helped Bill Romanowski start, what is it called now?
Lean One, isn't it? Nutrition 53?
Yeah, Lean One, Neuro One. It was like Nutrition 53 before, but now it's like Neuro One. But it's just formulations that give you a lot of energy, help you work out and all that. But I was advising him. I flew with Bill to Vegas and went to Jerry Bruckheimer's hockey tournament, and we were feeding out all the players this neuro drink and everyone was getting all wired. So it's just these funny vignettes from life experience of following these things down the rabbit hole has formed some really cool memories.
Look, why wouldn't any podcaster want that shared? You just said, I go on these podcasts, and this is exactly what I hate about the podcast world. It's often short, it's super tactical, that doesn't apply to many businesses, and it's a lot of people who don't share any of the downsides or how they got where they are. And how is that relatable to anybody who's not gotten off the couch yet, right? And so hearing your story of being in a band and moving this way, and then your mom's doing psychic reading, or your stepmom's doing psychic readings, which leads to you working on Neuro One with Bill Romanowski. This is the stuff that's awesome to share. People want to hear these stories. And that's why I started this podcast, because everyone that I've run into, their journey is unbelievable. And I want people to understand that no one's special. We've all been through these unbelievable, weird journeys that end up where we are today. And it's all, by taking action. And so I can't believe nobody would want that shared on their podcast.
Amen. I mean, here's a little funny one. Hopefully Bill doesn't track me down and beat me up for this, but we were flying to Vegas to do a seminar, and it was like a Southwest flight. And he's like, watch this. You go up to the front. He starts limping. He goes, hey, ma'am, just a little injured. Do you mind if we like board the plane first? And she recognizes him and goes, oh, Bill, yes, of course. So we skip the whole line, go onto the walkway to get to the plane, and then he starts walking normal again, and he turns at me and goes, that worked out well. I was just like, what a ham. So now we're sitting in the front seat of Southwest, and of course everybody coming on the plane recognizes him. And this was shortly after he left the NFL. But that was one person where if I rolled with Bill Romanowski, it made me appreciate fame. Like, that guy got recognized. That guy it's interesting to be with people that have that level of recognition and focus placed on them. And it's something I've always like tried to draw lessons from. How do people compose themselves when all eyes are on them?
What's your major takeaways from that?
I do think it comes back to a solid sense of identity and self. Like, Bill Romanowski wasn't seeking approval in other people by acting the way he did. Rather, he would be pleased that people recognized him. And I'm sure he got a rush out of it on some level, but he was consistently himself when we were sitting alone doing a planning session, or when 5 people are coming up like, hey, can I get your autograph? So I guess just that consistency, that authenticity, I'm not saying everybody has that, but I noticed it in him. And it's nice, to see the other side of putting in all the work and achieving some amount of material success, 4 Super Bowls, and to still kind of be like the same person, not that he changed into some completely different person as a result.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Seeking approval or trying to be accepted, or, you know what I mean? That goes back to our caveman roots of like trying to fit in the tribe and not be outcast out of the tribe. So like, I feel like we see that a lot. Just in social media, and heck, in my own life, I did it for years as a kid, trying to fit into a ton of different groups where I just didn't fit in. I just wanted someone to like me. And so it's interesting that you see people who have that level of success have no need for that. They don't care anymore, right? They found themselves and they're happy with who they are.
Best case scenario, that's true. I imagine he also had his own issues he was dealing with.
I'm sure. I mean, you were trying to be a rock star, right? Like, we were shooting for those problems. I know I was, right? I was dreaming of the girls and the drugs, and I wanted all of those things, right? And, now being 36, boy, I'm glad I didn't go down that route, because I think it would have been bad.
Yeah, well, since we're on the stories topic, what I recognized in the band era was my window of opportunity to meet a girl by virtue of being in a band was that 20 to 30 minutes after our set ended. And it wasn't until later that I realized, oh, they're like seeing me fully expressed in my passion. Performing on stage has some connotation of importance. But I just knew once the set was over, throw my stuff in a case, shove it backstage, don't go load the van, go out and make the rounds and meet people while we're still fresh. So just these little pivots and little adaptations from like observing things firsthand is what I always find myself focusing on.
Well, I want to take you back. We don't have to dabble too much in here, but right after you are in finance, in the heyday of finance before the world went haywire in 2008, you somehow become a dating coach. Like, walk me. I want to get to the book publishing, but I have to hear the rest of this story because it just continues to get more and more interesting.
No, this is a good one. And there's a book involved. So some of you may know the book, The Game, written by Neil Strauss, something about penetrating the secret world of pickup artists. But I got a copy of that book at an airport about to fly to Mexico for a conference in like 2006 or 7. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Mostly because I never really had felt like I was in control of causing girls to like me. Like I was mentioning just a moment ago, I recognized where was like my window of opportunity, or if I play my cards right, maybe she'll like me. But the whole concept of being able to play relationships like a game was a huge perspective shift. But beyond just reading the book, I then went online, found out there was a whole forum of guys trading tips and supporting each other to go out and meet women and all that. And I ended up just going all the way down the rabbit hole. On the other side of that, I became an instructor for the company that grew out of the game. It was called Mystery Method. Then it became Love Systems. It was right as I joined. From my perspective, it was great. Like, I get flown around the world, teach weekend seminars as a junior instructor with some of these guys that I had looked up to and admired, who were just social ninjas, and then go out and like help these guys hit on girls and meet girls. And after 1:30 in the morning or so, I could meet some myself. And so I was like, I literally would say to myself many times, this is the best job in the world. Being flown around the world to meet girls and have fun. Now, there's other parts to it. Like, it wasn't all just fun and games, but in a sense, it was pretty glorious. And from my perspective, it was really empowering to feel more confident that I could convey my personality and a girl could be attracted to me as a result, instead of trying to like figure out where to show up or where to be for a girl to hopefully like me, kind of thing. But yeah, that led to been to the Playboy Mansion 4 times. 3 of them, I was teaching a boot camp there. Flown to Hong Kong, Singapore, London, Chicago, all over the place to teach these workshops. And you let me know what questions you have about it. But it was certainly an interesting phase of my younger life.
Look, I think you're not the first person I've heard talk about the game. It's interesting how people look back and talk about it, right? In today's very PC world, some of that stuff was probably very unacceptable looking back. So I know, heck, there was some guy that got me into drop shipping that I'm pretty sure was part of the same thing that you were part of and was teaching it. And he hid it for a long time, and then it came out and everybody kind of shit on him. And then I know somebody, I think Sam Parr from The Hustle talks about that he got into that book, and it was more about confidence for him and how that actually like changed the trajectory of his life confidence wise. And I think there's a lot of people who talk about it in both directions. So I don't want to be judgmental in any way, shape, or form. I would imagine at that age, at that time, it probably did a lot of wonderful things for your confidence, as well as when you're in your early 20s, there's not a lot on your mind besides women, if I'm honest with you. And so, I'm sure I could ask a million questions there, but I'll let you put the bow on it wherever you'd like to put the bow on it.
No, this is what I'd say is like the thing that I didn't expect getting into that. I got into it. I was like, wow, it's possible to have a little more control over my experience with women and dating the kind of woman that I want and conveying myself and my personality. But where it led, which I didn't expect, was it was so rewarding to work with guys. And again, from a wide variety of backgrounds, some very successful and financially and 2 decades older than me, and some that had like saved up their money, and this boot camp was kind of like their last shot before they gave up on girls, and everything in between. And to be able to like see and help somebody move the needle in their life, to see their confidence or their enthusiasm when a girl just even gives them attention or shows interest, it was very rewarding to get to help guys deal with something that, quite frankly, is like a secret shame that a lot of men carry, or just a big question mark about how do I even like go about dating and attracting the kind of girls I may really want to date. So I met some amazing people, and a number of the other instructors when I was in that space are still some of my closest friends today. In most cases, we've all pivoted to other like areas of life, but it's pretty cool to have those experiences and build those relationships while doing all the fun stuff too.
Well, I think the ability to travel to the places you traveled at a young age is incredible. I've only traveled outside the country a few times, all of them to Thailand and to China. And so I'm jealous of the fact that you got to visit many, many places in the world as a young human, right? I would imagine that opened your eyes to a ton of things, which, the next thing on your About Us page talks about you owning a USB superstore, that had operations in China, and you learned Mandarin. Like, you wouldn't be where you are today without the unique experience you had. So I'm certainly not one here that's going to, look back and judge on those experiences. I'm sure some will, but to each their own. I can only imagine that a lot of that was incredible.
Yeah, if you don't like what I shared, don't leave Ben a bad review on his podcast. Take it out on me.
So how does that lead it? How does you being a dating coach and traveling around the world, putting on seminar, how does that lead to you running a USB superstore? And eventually, I know we got about 35 minutes left. I do want to get into like what you're doing now with Lifestyle Entrepreneur Press and like helping people publish books. And I want to try to tie all this together. But how does going from a dating coach turn into an e-commerce business?
Yeah, it does. It does tie together actually, which is nice. Like, look, at this point in life, 28, 29 years old, I really wasn't like rolling in dough. I was looking at these boot camps as an adventure I could have. Like, someone's going to fly me around and pay for my meals in a hotel. Let's go. So I wasn't like making bank off of these boot camps, but it was more the experience. And we started doing a lot in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai. In fact, my friend and I opened up Asia as a market for Love Systems by doing these. Concurrently, I was starting to study Mandarin Chinese, and I was very attracted to Asian women at that time. So, and that's the kind of the thing, right? Is like, there is a perfect overlap of a few interests combined into one life pursuit. So if I could go and teach boot camps in Asia, I'd get flown to Asia, I could use my Chinese skills, learn more Chinese, and moonlight by setting up the basis for a drop shipping business. And that's exactly what I do. So I get flown to Hong Kong, I teach a boot camp for the weekend. Then Monday, I jump on the train, go to Shenzhen, visit some factories, get my supplier stuff in order, come back Thursday, fly to Singapore, teach another boot camp, and then go home. And I just share that as like, that's how I'd look at it, as like, all right, here's another leg of the adventure. I'm going to go do these 2 boot camps, get my supplier stuff set up. Then when I'm back home, keep chipping away at like the website part of it. So that is a real example of how like I started setting up this wholesale USB products business because I saw an opportunity and I had some connections to the initial suppliers, but also because it complemented my other interests of studying Chinese and being in this dating space. And so anyhow, we went from starting USB Superstore 2 weeks after the economy tanked in 2008, grew it to a $500,000 business in gross sales in the first year. And then I sold it 18 months after starting it. And it was at that time that I was like, from idea to execution all the way through, I can see it so clearly. And that was when I started writing what became my own book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur. And so that was the through line of like these adventures, following my passion from one thing to another, incorporating more than one interest in an endeavor, to being like, what was my actual process, and writing it. And that's how I became first an author. I got a publishing deal in Asia. Was my first publisher, was based out of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And so not many people know this now, but my book first came out in Malaysia and Singapore as a print book only. This is not a Kindle bestseller. This is not like a free ebook type of thing. I literally went and toured Malaysia and Singapore, spoke at book fairs, put in the groundwork, and became #2 business bestseller over there, knowing and hoping and believing that some success in a smaller market could get me a publisher in the US. And I ended up landing a publisher in the US as a result, updated the book again, and then in 2014, it came out in the US and the rest of the world. And that's the version of Lifestyle Entrepreneur that most people see today. But I just share that because, and this is true with many books and authors, there's like different iterations of the book and the idea before it's the one that we see on a shelf, before it's the finished version. And I lived through that firsthand as an author. And as entrepreneurs are wont to do, I said, man, there's so many things I'd do differently if I was running this publishing company. But then the question just became, as it always does, am I going to do something about it, or am I just going to observe that there's opportunity here? But Ben, that's the real pivot. From all the things I've been involved in, all the different interests I've had in life, I've been running Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press for 7 years now, which is like 5 times longer than anything else I've ever done.
Where's the genesis for that book? So just reading through, you sold the USB Superstore, you moved back, went to Berkeley. That university gave you an opportunity to go to China and Taiwan, studying Chinese language and culture. So by the time you graduated, you actually racked up 3 diplomas, one from Beijing Normal University, another from National Taiwan University, and of course, the UC Berkeley diploma as well. Somehow through all of that, you spawned the idea to write a book. So where's the genesis of that? Because I'll be honest, when I listened to a few old podcasts from you this morning while I was walking on the treadmill, trying to get an idea of which angle should I take on this. And I got imposter syndrome through the roof, thinking of the topics I think I could actually write a book on. I was like, wait, who am I to write this book? And so where does it spawn in you that you're like, I should tell this story? And I think you say, in this page that you wanted to talk more about the business model rather than your journey in the beginning. And so help me understand where the beginning idea came from and what it's the emotion surrounding that.
Great question. Thank you for that. So as I'm just thinking back, okay, here's how it played. I had the business going. We grew to $500,000 in the first year. Then I transferred into UC Berkeley. In that first semester, I was torn in two. The business started to suffer. There was not enough hours in the day. I wasn't doing good in school. And it became a crisis point, was like, all right, do I drop out of school weeks after transferring into Berkeley, or do I change something with the business? And I decided to pursue the university route. And so I put the business up for sale and I found a buyer, but then one of my partners tried to block it. It became this huge, really uncomfortable situation of trying to not get sued, trying to do my schoolwork, and trying to make it all happen. So at the end of that first semester, the sale went through, and as it did, I was getting on a plane to China to study in Beijing for the summer, and it was like this space opened up where I was like, just write, if nothing else, write the process from when I decided to start USB Superstore, the steps I took to make it a virtual business. That's the promise of the book, was live your dreams, ignite your passions, and run your business from anywhere in the world. And back in 2007, 8, 9, that's what I was doing. Maybe it's a little more commonplace now, but I was running that company while traveling internationally months of the year. So I thought that was interesting to write about the structure of a virtual business in a way that anybody else could apply it. And that's exactly what I did. But it wasn't until I met that publisher and they said, we started to get to talking, and they're like, you've got an interesting life. Why don't you share some of your stories and incorporate some of the stories of other people that do this instead of it just being a how-to book? So I'm very thankful. My first editor with my first publisher that I worked with helped me flush out the book to become what it is now, including those stories and drawing a through line through life instead of here's how to start an online business that you can run from anywhere. And that's it. That's all this book is about. So it was expanding that scope, which in that process was stepping out from behind the scenes. Like with USB Superstore, my name wasn't even on the website. Sometimes I'd be customer service. Sometimes I'd be president. Sometimes I'd be sales guy. To now as an author and then speaking and ultimately creating training programs and things, now it's becoming a semi-public persona. And that was a really interesting shift, which I now help midwife people shift into becoming published authors as a practice. But it was really interesting to step out and speak on behalf of my own experience, which I hadn't really done at that point in life. Although now, here we are on a podcast, and now this has become much more familiar to me.
So I feel like I'm missing something when it comes to you had this idea, you go find a publisher and you write this book and then you put it out. Like, were you ready for that type of transition into, being a thought leader, I guess, right? Like, author is like short for authority, right? Like that's the root of the word. And so like, were you ready to be the authority on being a lifestyle entrepreneur? And certainly there's other books that are out there. Like 4 Hour Workweek came out in 2007, which was more systemized and drop shipping. And I know some of the people who taught me what I learned, some courses I took, learned from that book. And so, what were you expecting when you put out this book? What was it like? Where were you expecting to go? And then what happened? What has the book done for you?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, at the time I was writing and it was starting to come out, I did not foresee that I'd end up running a book publishing company. I was much more interested in the experience of sharing at that point 8 or 9 years of following my interests and passions all around the world and across a variety of industries. I felt like there was something there worth sharing. And we're talking through it as though it happened very, very quickly, but it was a process. Like I had a friend from one of these dating boot camps that had written a book, and he was telling me how cool it was to be an author and how he got new business. And then there was like Brendan Burchard was just coming out, and I really admired what he was doing with his book and then having associated courses and events. I was like, that's an interesting model. And I also thought, okay, well, I'm this big white guy that speaks Chinese. There's an opportunity to be a big fish in a smaller pond by having my book come out in Malaysia and Singapore. And that ended up being prescient because the publisher actually got behind it when they found out I was willing to travel over there and speak and do promo. So it was a good mix coming into that. But it was like a 4 to 6 month process from when we signed that deal, working with the editor, getting the book all done, and then it finally came out. But then they set up a book tour 2 months later. So basically in 1 year, I flew to Malaysia 4 different times, which that is a long flight. But long story short, I really enjoyed like meeting people after I spoke at a book fair or just talking to random people and signing a book and hearing a little bit about their life experience. It became a new way to get insight on the human experience, and I really enjoyed it. So I wasn't thinking of it too grandiose of like, now I'm stepping out to be the next like massive New York Times bestseller, but more of pivoting to have the book to in turn attract the right kind of clients and people that I wanted to work with, and building a business on the back end of the book, which was exactly what I did with training program. I had a business in a weekend virtual event where we just did a bunch of Zoom calls and I helped people launch their business in real time, things like that. And so I made it interactive and that was enjoyable. And going through that process myself over 2 years or so as an author is what catalyzed friends that were working on books saying, hey, can you give me some advice? Or, hey, let me run this by you. And they all ended up saying, Ben, can you just do it for me? And I started to say yes. And for 6.5 years, Done For You Publishing has been our sole offer. So I just kind of try and tune into what's the language that people are using, what's the motivation and what's the driving force in their life experience, and how can I either support that or like level that up. And that was very much what led to publishing.
So did that come from trial and error? Like you just said, you had some courses and, you see a lot of people out in the marketplace, they have their book, which leads you to, come join their Facebook group, or there's a million different call to actions throughout the book, right? That get you into their community, having more touch points with them. It likely teaches you a skill, and then they have a course for the next step of that skill or more in depth of that skill. Did you try all of those methods like you were explaining, and you did some weekend things and the publisher one just spoke to you more? Or like what made you settle on the, becoming Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press versus, being the next Brendan Burchard, right? Being on stages or having multiple courses or things like that?
Yeah, I definitely started to go down that route of being like a thought leader or being a semi-public figure with courses. And I ran live event for 3 years called Bestseller Summit Live. And I guess I got my hands on a lot of different parts of the authority puzzle, like a course, an event, a mastermind, a training program. Like, what are those different modalities? And I've tried a number of them now, running a summit, doing a launch, being a partner on other people's launches. And that was really instructive because it let me be a good advisor and supporter for other authors. But I guess my personal, the real driving force was I love that it's a long-term focus. Like, in some cases, we're publishing our third and fourth books with some authors, and that's a years-long relationship. So much of what I had done earlier in life was, if not transactional, just more short-term in nature, not a big commitment, not a long-term thing, like teaching a weekend boot camp or playing a show and then leaving town hours later. It was all kind of hit and run a little bit more, whereas now it's like rooting down. And I love that we're building a catalog of books that I believe in that can live on for any amount of time. So I guess I have a longer term perspective. Maybe that's more maturity. Maybe I just got a bunch of stuff out of my system, but I feel more grounded, and that if I just show up every day and support our authors and try and sell more books, that it's building a momentum that I don't know exactly where it will lead, but it excites me even years into this. Instead of in other pursuits, I do it for a while and then something else will look appealing. And so I'd pivot. I guess the thing is, I get to work with a number of creative people and a number of different projects within the same umbrella, within the same business. Whereas most of my book was about being involved in 2 or 3 different things at once that may be unrelated, other than the fact that I was interested in all 2 or 3 of them.
Your book was very specific about being a lifestyle entrepreneur, right? So when you started Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, did you try to stay in that same genre of people, or are you publishing books from all over different types of niches?
Yeah, the majority are business owners and entrepreneurs, doctors and health and wellness experts, and spiritual leaders or people in the personal development, self-help space. Those categories cover 80 to 90% of the books that we've published. And I guess in that sense, there's a common thread. We're not doing fiction. We're not doing erotica. We're not doing cookbooks. It's like practical life advice and how to accomplish and achieve things in a business sense and in a personal sense. Basically, real information that people can use, which just circles back to, the bigger thing of authenticity and just truth. Like, there's so much incorrect information. There's so much intentionally biased information. I'll just go out and say it. Every traditional publisher is one part of a multinational media conglomerate, and that's determining what type of books they're publishing and what voices even get support. So I do see us as an independent kind of lighthouse, as it were, that attracts a certain kind of people and is geared to support an entrepreneurial, passionate author, thought leader, entrepreneur, doctor.
Yeah, I see quite a few. I'm just scrolling through here on Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press /books. .com/books. There's quite a few I actually recognize on here that I didn't know you worked with. I'm gonna have to pick your brain and maybe ask for some intros after this call. Cool that you stayed in that zone of entrepreneurs and doctors, and I like where you're at. I like the stories you're able to tell here, and I think I can relate. Again, having this podcast, I like telling those stories too. I'm a little jealous that you get to spend even more time and go deeper with people. But I know we're running short on time, so I want to get to all those dumb questions I have. Are you ready to just get pounded with dumb questions?
Yeah, maybe this becomes a 2-part interview, but we'll see.
I'm going to fire away with just dumb questions. All right, so again, back to the beginning. I have published a book on Kindle. It was not that hard. Amazon has traffic, right? They have audience. I don't know what their book ratio is, but like just e-commerce in general, they have 50% of e-commerce transactions. So maybe that looks the same on books. I can get one out there pretty quickly. Their algorithm isn't too hard to hack, if I'm honest with you. And so, like, tell me, what does a publisher do that would entice me to come work with you writing a book versus just getting it out of my head and getting it up on Kindle?
Yeah, I mean, what you described is totally valid. It's never been easier to self-publish. And for someone that knows online marketing and stuff, you can get it very seen and get in front of people very easily with Amazon's self-publishing platform. For us as a publisher, Amazon does make up a large percent of our business. The main difference, or one of the main differences, is like when we're publishing a book, we'll schedule it 6-7 months in advance. Whereas with self-publishing, you're like, it's done, let's put it up, let's start promoting it, and now it's live. Whereas for us, we'll schedule in advance and start driving pre-sales. And then one of the benefits of us as a publisher, or any publisher, is that we'll get a multiple on those pre-sales. So if we do a campaign and somebody pre-sells 1,000 books, we could pick up an order for 5,000 books, let's say from Amazon. And so now, even if 10, 15% of those books get returned, we're still ahead of the pack by a multiple. And so that's one of the values we bring, is like getting advance of the release date. Our partnership with Ingram, which is the largest book provider in North America, has a sales team of about 50 people. And so there is support within the retail and within the trade for the books we publish. So that's one value of a publisher, just in terms of sales and market access. But where we're unique is I'm personally involved with every author and every project. I've been tempted to be like, let's just scale. We'll publish 100 plus books a year, which could happen, but it's a very different business than doing a few dozen and being involved in each aspect, as well as that author's broader business strategy. And for me, that's rewarding. It also leads to more successful books than the throw the spaghetti at the wall approach and just put a bunch of stuff out there and hope some of it does well.
Is there
there's more to say there, but
yeah, is there a PR component to this too? I know, again, I'm a Minnesota Twins junkie. I listen to a podcast called Gleeman and the Geek, where they only talk Minnesota Twins. Aaron Gleeman is much bigger junkie than I am, and wrote a book like the top 50 Twins moments in history or something like that, right? And he put it out through a publisher, and maybe didn't make him super happy, but they set him up to go talk at Barnes & Noble at the Mall of America and like other places. And so certainly when I'm throwing my book up on Kindle, Amazon's not going to tell me to go get on podcasts or promote it in any way, shape, or form, right? And so what advantages does a publisher have with the relationships you've already built as far as promotion goes and PR?
Yeah, the best case scenario is when we have a PR team or we have a publicist involved. So we have us, the publisher, publicist, and the author and that author's team. That's like the trifecta. But absent a publicist that's pitching, getting TV placements, radio, articles, features, there's a way to hustle that into existence. And we do focus on that with authors. But I'll be straight up in saying that like PR and good book PR is like a full-time job in itself. Whereas publishing and overseeing the editing, design, layout, formatting, printing, distribution, logistics, all of that is like its own wheelhouse. And then the author building their platform, online presence, strategy for what other offers they have available. If we can get all of those right, that's when we get potentially explosive results. But any PR and any publicity helps. Like best case scenario, like our friend, George Bryant, he was on New York Times bestseller for 20 weeks because he had 1 to 3 big podcast episodes dropping every week for 20 weeks. And so constant exposure to new audiences with a compelling message and a clear call to action to buy the book, that's what results in bigger and bigger book sales numbers. But it also like turns the marketing crank. If more books are selling, our sales team is telling the retailers to buy even more books. And we try and create this virtuous cycle effect, which doesn't really exist in self-publishing, although you could just do good PR or just have a great marketing funnel and sell a ton of books as a self-published author. So I think the real benefit is authors want the support. Like it takes an entrepreneurial kind to be like, I'm going to learn everything about book production and marketing and all of that while writing a great book and then promoting it. Whereas we can come in and support on a variety of things so the author stays focused on building their business and getting access to new opportunities.
Yeah, I'm catching what you're throwing now. So I would assume you have some sort of partnership with somebody who can do PR if you wanted to go that route. By the way, George Bryant, episode 24, go listen to that. If you're a marketer at all, go listen to that. You're going to love every minute of that. We did talk about how he outlined his book method one day. It was the final day of his mastermind and half the people went home. It was incredible. Like him actually outlining how he did all that. His bestseller journey is incredible. So I'm starting to understand you are, like what you described earlier, more on the done for you side. And so help me understand, like walk through the process of like, I call you and I'm like, Jesse, I've got this, Google Shopping for dummies in my head. I need to get this out of my head. And like, I don't know how to write this other than write it in blog post format for the Google robot. Right. And so like, help me understand the done for you side of what you're able to do when somebody has something they want to get out into the world, but they don't know how to write a book.
Yeah, good question. Kind of big question. I mean, I look at it, to be honest, there's writing a great book and then publishing as the two main buckets to bring that book to market. Writing a great book or creating a great book, I would start with, like if it's business oriented, like your example, is think about what's the sequence of events that you would take a client through to get results. So if it's Google marketing, if it's SEO, whatever that is, think about what's the mechanism, like how would you help them get results and what order of events, what do they need to know and understand to get results? What are the first steps, second steps, so on. Once you're getting results, how do you increase or amplify those? And that thought process starts to become the chapters or the logical flow of the book. You want to mirror the same process as a business owner you take your client through in the reading experience as a baseline. And then you dress it up with stories or exciting, takeaways or something that'll shift their perspective. But front to back, you're delivering a valuable experience that will teach them how to do something new or overcome a problem while being entertained. And so I've got, in a 30 to 45 minute conversation, I can usually get somebody to the point of being like, here's a draft of what the outline could be. It may not be the final one, but once that exists, sleep on it, think about it for a day or two, you'll start to get insights for like, no, it should be in this order. And like, actually, what I want to say here is like this. So I kind of either catalyze the process and keep it moving forward while seeding in suggestions and ideas throughout. And that's a little bit of the recipe to like create a great book.
I got one more. I know we're running up against it, so I got one more question I just want to understand. And by the way, I think we need to talk after this because I'm getting so many ideas just on a personal side, so we should connect again soon. How does the business deal work? Like, is there an upfront fee? Does the publisher, front some money, and then like who owns what? Who owns like percentage wise, and then who owns like the IP? And like, can you help me understand the business side of this? And I know this has to be short, but hopefully you're able to zip through it.
No, it's pretty straightforward with us. We do 50% net margins on the book for royalties. So that's 2 to 3 times more than traditional publishers pay. They pay like 10, 20%. So we do 50% on net once the book's out.
So you're saying traditional publishers would give me 10 to 20%?
Correct.
And you're saying you guys give 50?
Correct.
Okay.
And on the front end, for the 6 to 9 months of work that goes into having that published book, that's our done for you publishing service. It's either a $15,000 investment or no money down, and the author runs a crowdfunding campaign to fund $10,000, which we would keep to cover production expenses. And then anything over $10,000, 70% of it's for the author. So we've got 2 flavors of either crowdfunding campaign. We've got a platform. We've helped over 100 authors run these kind of campaigns. Or if you don't want to go through that whole process, then a $15,000 investment takes us all the way through. And that's all inclusive. So that takes us through to a published book, and then we're sending royalties to the authors quarterly.
Well, I definitely want to talk to you more after this. I think you're working with some people that have been on this podcast. So episode 3, Bree, I think you're working with her on something. If you're not, you definitely should be. I know she's talked about it many, many times. Are you working with the Evo Hemp guys still?
That one sort of died on the vine.
Okay.
That book. We started to.
Well, if you want to hear a shortened version of that story, check out episode 11 with Jordan Samel. I think they would make a great book. They've had a breadth of experience in bringing hemp to where it is today. And then, are you doing something with George?
Yeah, we did the Thrive Guide, and if and when he ever does his next full length book, I'm on deck waiting for him.
Yeah, if he needs a push. Yeah, if he needs a push, let me know. George has a lot in his head, and I can imagine someone like you could help get that out in a concise manner. And you wouldn't have to do much than tee up a ball to George to get him to talk for a few hours, right? So again, check out his episode 24. The guy is he's a marketing wizard for sure.
So are you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Hey, look, I know you got to run. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish you would have got out there? And if so, or if not, follow that with where can people find more about you?
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I would be happy to continue the chat on or offline. LifestyleEntrepreneursPress.com. You can find me, or just do a search for Jesse Krieger. You'll find a bunch of results from different phases of my somewhat interesting life experience. But thanks so much, Ben, for having me on here.
Yeah, I'll put all of those links in the show notes, and I'll put a link to your old band on Apple Music too, if anybody wants to check that out. I appreciate you coming on, man. I really do.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
I really hope you enjoyed that show as much as I did. Jesse's story is unique, yet it's kind of what we all go through. There is no overnight success, and it's interesting to hear how different people go through different stages in their life and what brings them to, their calling, if you will. Again, I had dreadlocks. I was in a couple different metal bands, and I was all over the place in my younger years, and now here I am really finding what I like to do, and I think Jesse's done the same thing. We didn't take a straight line, and I don't think any person's life ever goes in a straight line. So hopefully this was inspiring, that if you're still on that journey of trying to figure it out, that you're going to figure it out, and that maybe give some validation to people who maybe look back on their past and wonder, could it have gone a different direction? Just be happy where you are. Be happy that you found what you love. So appreciate Jesse coming on. Definitely check him out. LifestyleEntrepreneursPress.com or JesseKrieger.com. All of those will be in the show notes. A link to his book will be in the show notes. A link to his hit song will be in the show notes. So check all those out, and I'll see all of you next Wednesday.